All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third episode of the Healing Through Mind and Motion podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cade. This is where we explore the relationship between the mind and body and how we can heal our body from chronic pain and get back to doing the things we want to do with our lives. I'm excited to have Ricki Stanzi here on the podcast. He is a former quarterback, played for Iowa in college, and got drafted by the NFL to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's now co-owner of Goata and the professor coach for Goata. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So I wanted to kind of dive in because you said the transition from the football and quarterback to movement, like that story is what makes you so passionate about this stuff. Could you go in how you found Goata and what that path was for you?
Yeah, for sure. So it kind of starts for me right around the draft process. I'm finishing up my senior year of college and I'm going into the draft. And at that time, I had felt that my mechanics were lacking. They were insufficient to what would be needed at that next level. And that's where I started to seek out help and try to find answers and kind of look underneath the hood a little bit and slow things down. And I was fortunate enough to work with Tom Martinez, he's since passed, but he's Tom Brady's original quarterback coach since Tom was 12. And so they had a long history, and I was fortunate enough to work with him and actually stay at his place and learn from him for a little bit. And he was the first guy that kind of opened up the door, so to speak, to biomechanics and this idea that there is an optimal way to move, and we should all be trying to work towards that optimal setting. And that was the start of it. And it was really, just shy of a decade of looking in every corner, Western, Eastern, to try to find what eventually became, home base for me, which is now Goata. And I first probably saw Goata probably late 2017, 2018, blending into 2019. And 2019 is really where I started to take a role in Goata. And that was off the backs of, speaking to Gary a little bit more about what they were doing and peeling back like a lot of people do nowadays, trying to learn more through Instagram, and kind of getting an idea of what they may have been speaking on, but having no idea what they were actually speaking on at the time. And I laugh now thinking about what I thought Goata was even in 2019, even at my first cert, and compared to what it really is after watching the video. And that, back to being a quarterback in my world was always confirmed through slow motion. So everything we're doing as an athlete, as a football player, it's centered around this slow motion video. We literally watch tape before we go to practice, and then we come right back in and we watch the tape again. And so we're constantly confirming off of and adjusting off of what we see on tape. So, that sort of, backbone to who I was as a person goes back to 8th grade, watching VHS tapes, getting ready for a football game and trying to learn more about my opponent, and knowing that slowing things down gave me more clarity on any situation. And so having that there, and then looking as I went through my own personal journey of trying to fix my own injuries in the process of trying to throw a football better, move my feet better, do all those little fundamentals better. Like we had talked about, I started with the Western arts. I'd come from the world of powerlifting, Olympic lifting, your traditional strength and conditioning world that's still prevalent today. And so I kind of studied that world, the Kelly Starretts, some of the, gymnastic strength people that are talking about, some of that sort of pure strength off the bar, pure strength off the handstand and stuff. And I kind of looked in that world a little bit, and then started to peek at the Eastern arts of, yoga and martial arts. I had trained martial arts as a kid, so kind of getting back into that was comfortable. I always was very respectful of the work and discipline that they had, and seeing what the Western had to offer, and knowing that I had already kind of tapped that out and I'd done all those things and I was still in pain, looking to the Eastern arts was almost a necessity at the time, because I was trying to lift weights. I was trying to do kettlebell swings and deadlifts, and I just kept hurting myself. I just kept having the same back spasms I always had, more frequent. The shoulders would lock up. The groin and hammy would continue to pull, and those things just, I was always felt to be a more durable athlete, and that
Right.
kind of was just being stripped away as I went. And the Eastern art provided a new template for me. It led to a book that I often cite, which is Muscles and Meridians by Philip Beach. And in that book spoke to ground resting. It spoke to a natural reset that was laid out by nature. Philip Beach was observing that terrestrial animals are resting on the ground to keep tuned for the next movement. And that was so interesting to me because I'm like, wow, there's a reset button. There's something that's innate to what we're doing as humans as far as movement goes, and I'm not doing it. I know that. I don't know what it is, but I know that I'm not doing it because I don't feel good and something's not right. And so that book spoke to those two concepts of ground rest and then Spinal Engine. And then Spinal Engine led me to the actual book Spinal Engine by Sergei Grakovetsky. That led me to Instagram looking for Spinal Engine, talking about it. There was really only 3 people that had mentioned it. One of them was Goata. The other was a golf coach. I don't want to butcher his name, but I think it's Kelvin Miyahara. I apologize if I got that one wrong. And then David Weck in Weck Method. And so that's where I was like, okay, it's somewhere here, because everything I was taught was don't move your spine. And now the research that this guy put forth, which it's old research, it's like back in the 80s, and nobody ever looked at it. Just nobody cared what he had to say.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting to me yeah, go ahead.
Can we in like I know we'll go deeper into it, but like, can you define what Goata is? Because if someone's never heard
Yeah.
of it, because we keep talking like, yeah, and then I found Goata. It's like, what is that for somebody who's never heard of it?
So Goata is a movement system that's centered around slow motion video. And Goata stands for the greatest of all time actions. And that slow motion video is what led to that blueprint that we call Goata, the greatest of all time actions, the global laws of forward movement. The question was posed by Jose Bosch: how does a body travel through space for a lifetime and never get hurt for no apparent reason? Why are in our Western society, and any chair dwelling society, shoe sitting society, sports society, there tends to be this non-contact phenomenon of ACLs, Achilles. You can go on and on with the injuries that are being acquired without being hit. Just us moving about, something falling apart, eventually leading into joint replacement. So that's sort of the backdrop question that Gilly was trying to solve, because his own body had failed him. And his mind was like, what leads a Michael Jordan to be able to do what he does, as opposed to me, that I'm the same age and I've got 3 degenerative discs. And that was where his journey began. He looked at, he had all the best doctors in the area to try to help him. He had 8 or so doctors of different backgrounds to try to fix it. He couldn't get it fixed. And that was when he started to look for different modalities. His breakthrough came with Peter Gostiu. And that was really his first, like, oh, I have a little breath here. I have, some space to eradicate this pain. But when he would go to move, things would break down again. And so that kind of led to, let me take a deeper look. Let me do something that probably hasn't been done. Let's get this iPad out. Now the technology allowed for this to happen. And let's peer into sort of the groups of what I deem to be the most durable humans. So you're looking at the child development, right? The crawling baby, leading into adolescence. You're looking at the indigenous cultures, specifically the cultures that are still butt naked, barefoot. Those mostly reside in the Amazon. Our favorite tribe to point to is the Karubo tribe. That was decade plus super reliable athletes like Michael Jordan, Randy Moss, and Ed Reed. And then finishing up the study with the 70 plus age groupers at the track and field world championships, like an Ida Keeling, a Hurricane Hawkins. And when Gilly was looking at these groups of humans that were, for the most part, durable compared to the rest of the population, a pattern kept showing. Straight foot, inside ankle bone high, well-organized columns, the bow, the corner, head control, back chain dominance. And that's where Goata came from. And then after that, understanding of what was correct, it was very easy to see what was incorrect. And then you kind of look back at our own population, you look at how a non-contact takes place, which we do a lot of research on that. And you see it's really just the opposite. It's a falling apart of that Goata sort of pattern. And when that Goata pattern breaks down, you then see that there's a chance for a non-contact. There's a chance for a joint replacement. to take place. So Goata is essentially, like we talked about, it's almost an ongoing study. It's a continual study because we now have these iPads, we have these supercomputers that we can look into a YouTube glossary, look into Twitter media, Instagram media, Pinterest. We can pull from all these different areas quickly, and the regular person can now record screenshots, slow it down, and start to verify the patterns that they're seeing. And that's simply how Goata came about.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about it for my own learning as I'm going in is like I had a feeling of what good movement looked like, and we talked a little bit about the MoveNat guys and watching them. Not all of them have the ankle bone
Right.
high position, but as a whole, their movement patterns look good. But I couldn't figure out some of the pieces, and now that the language of like the bow, the corner, the release, the reset, and the columns and everything, it's like I can now see that it's like okay, that's exactly why it looks good. And it's like when it doesn't, you can see the pressure, like that turning in, or even like someone who's bow-legged, how they're rolling the ankle, like the heels, big toe starts to actually roll to the outside, like it lifts. And so that's one of the things like you can see it. And so you guys have done a great job from what I'm seeing is like reverse engineering that. Like, okay, this is how you move. How do we train that into our nervous system? Um, so you came into it and then found David Weck, Spinal Engine, and all of that. Was it a quick process where you're like, this makes sense and dove into the Goata stuff? Or what was kind of the process for you there? And right now, I think about.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly quick. Did I freeze?
Yeah, you froze there.
A little bit of freeze going on. Am I back? You're
I can,
frozen, drinking water on my screen.
yeah, I can hear you right now. I just can't.
You can hear me though?
I can hear you. Yep, you're good now. Yep, can you hear
You
me?
good? Okay, sorry about that. But the back, yeah, I got you. So back to your question about, was it a quick dive for me? And it kind of was, only because I had spent, like I said, I'd spent about 8 years. I always say emptying the cup. I tried this, didn't work, empty the cup, try this. So all the things that I had grown up with, Olympic lifting and, powerlifting and, Bosu ball upside down training. And like, all of it kept getting thrown out. And once Goda was presented, spinal engine, those things, I was like, this has got to be it. And then it was just more of looking at it and trying to essentially prove it wrong to start. And that was where I started with Gilly. Was his thing to me wasn't, trust what I say. It was, prove what I'm saying wrong. And that I always loved that because he was very selfless in how he looked at movement. Everybody else that I had come across that was a leader of a movement group had this sort of, arrogance about them, and it was about what they wanted and what they did. And Gilly was like, look, I'm wrecked. Don't move like me. Move
Yeah.
like these people. This is who we should be moving like. And I love that. And then the other part of it was he challenged me to do my own research, to do my own work. Go find, I remember the red pill moment. I remember sitting on my couch and texting him back and forth through DMs on Instagram. And he's like, think about the back squat. He's like, just think about the back squat, the heavy back squat that you've done, which I've done thousands and thousands of reps of that in my life. He's like, where's your heel when you're doing that? What is it doing? I'm like, well, it's in the ground. It's pressurizing. He's like, okay. He's like, think about that position. Look at those exercises. And now go look at the non-contacts. And he goes, tell me what you see. I'm like, well, they're the same. He's like, exactly. He's like, your nervous system is malleable. He's like, it is adhering to the environment that you're constantly putting it in. And so then I'm thinking about all the lifting I've done since 8th grade in my dad's basement to
Right.
the best trainers in the area, people that train LeBron James. And then I'm looking at the Google search of myself moving in college, and I'm looking at inside ankle bone low to the max. And then I'm starting to put together like, well, that's why the back keeps spasming. That's why the groin's starting to pull. That's why your left hip feels like it's got a flamethrower in it every morning you wake up. And then sort of that knowledge bomb from Gilly coupled with my own personal assessment of seeing myself move, it was is too much,
Yeah.
evidence to turn away from. It was too much of a coincidence. And then it was just, all right, this there's something here. This collaborates with what Philip Beach was talking about. This collaborates with what Sergey Grakovetsky was talking about. Two people I really respected for the way that they were going at their research, and the way that they presented themselves was much like Gilly had presented himself, which was just a, hey man, just look, just observe, like stop listening to the guy in the fitness suit, just look at nature. And that was always sort of the backdrop was nature's the objective reality here. We have to observe and then train accordingly. And so that was a pretty quick dive for me once I saw what Gilly and Gary were doing, because I was able to see what they were doing without listening to them talk. It wasn't Gilly and Gary talking to me. It was me literally spending nights looking at tribes and looking at the New Atlantis Tribe channel on YouTube and looking at tens of, 10, 20, 30 ACLs and Achilles and being like, where's the inside ankle bone high shred? Where's the bow shred? Like I can't find it. I can't prove this guy wrong. And so that is what just kept going. And it's still to this day. It's just a constant research, as you know. I mean, every day I'm filling my phone up with new video, and that's what I've always loved about Goata was the first time that a man stood up in front of me and said, stop listening to what I'm saying, turn around and go look at what nature's telling you.
And it seemed like you had already stripped away, like you were trying to lift and power lift and Olympic lift to
Yeah.
do better. So like you already had a long period of like, okay, I'm still hurting. I think I listened to an interview where you were like, I'm playing like you were third deep in like the lineup for quarterback. So like you're like, I'm not even playing that much and I'm still hurting. Like what's going on here? Um, you also something stood out as like I think eighth grade you had back pain, back spasms was eighth grade. Is that yeah? So it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like
I've had back problems my whole life.
yeah, and it's like how many athletes are learning to move by lifting. I see it all the time, and it's like I can see the position. And I started with the Egoscue as well, and I looked at okay, structurally you guys aren't sound, but
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna pick up 200 pounds, 300 pounds off the floor. Like what would happen if we actually moved well? And I've had to start evaluating the lifting part. Um, how do you? And I know you guys are working on this, but like, how do you get that mindset? It's complete like 180 from what we've been taught because we've worked with a baseball athlete. He's got pars fractures, like stress fractures of the vertebrae, and they're trying to have him squat and
Mm-hmm.
deadlift all the time. He's like, yeah, now I'm hurting again. He was feeling good. He's like, now back to lifting with his
Mm-hmm.
team. Where do you start to like? Is it the video or where do you start somebody out on that process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's the toughest part. Is that's why I call it the red pill. That's literally
Yeah,
why we call it the red pill, because it's a complete 180 from what's been given to you as truth. And, you know, the non-contacts, the injuries, let's just say this. There's there's more injuries that you can play through than there are that take you to the bench. And that's part of the problem is that everybody's got an injury that if they get up, they move around, they shake it out, they foam roll, they do something, they can let that thing, they can quiet it down enough to perform for the 1 hours, 2 hours, either at the gym,
yeah,
if you're a weekend warrior, or the 10-mile jog that, or run that you like to do, or if you're a top level athlete. Like we're all doing that. We all are living with non-contact injuries. Doesn't mean it has to be an ACL or Achilles. It's just that thing that's bothering you. And so there's more of those that you can work through and get through and still pull off a 315-pound deadlift or back squat in your gym and be like, dude, I'm killing it. But then completely ignore that there's this pain management that's going on for the majority of the day. So because that's accepted as normal, when you come across a young baseball player or something like that who the culture is speaking to one rep max, the culture is speaking to washboard abs, big muscle, huge deltoid, huge trap. What's bench, bro? What's your squat, bro? That's the culture of the athlete right now. And so to try and strip that away is, to be honest, it's something I constantly am trying to perfect
yeah.
as sort of a, in a salesman type mind, in a educator type mind, a professor type mind. How do I get across to this nervous system in front of me? What's going to make it eat that red pill? How do I get to this person? What's going to home for them? And I don't think there's a perfect answer for that. We are trying to constantly perfect that process so that more people show up. But what I try to do is I try to empty their cup for them. Sometimes I have to put my hand on their hand and pour it out, and we do that with slow motion, and we strip away their preconceived notions. And part of that is allowing them to ask those questions. Throw it at me. What do you not like about what I said? Because what you don't like about what I said is what I'm going to rip apart so that you can understand why I said it in the first place. Because I know that that kid that's sitting there, I was that kid.
Yeah.
And in 2015, I'm sitting in a high school, Bishop Kenny down in Jacksonville, and I'm teaching Olympic lifting. So, and I'm sitting there with Kelly Surratt's book, and I'm, band flossing, and I'm buying all the rollers and shit. And I'm telling these kids that this is the real deal. This is great. This is what you do as my back's giving out, as my body's underperforming. And I'm just feeding the bullshit back to the youth. And so the first part is to try to strip away the preconceived notions. And to be honest with you, some people just aren't ready for that. Either the ego is too attached to something. I found that to be a powerful part of this process, is that people have literally attached their self-worth to a deadlift, to a back squat, to a pull-up. They've seen something, they've seen a starting point, then they've seen change in the mirror, in themselves, and that feels good. And that good feeling that you get from the deadlift, from the pull-up, from the back squat, it's very easy to let that good feeling drown out the bad feelings, right? I've been there. I've done the back squats where you lift up and you hit a weight you never hit. That is a bigger high and sort of more of something that a human body will want to gravitate to left. Why do I wake up, or why do I go under center and my back spasms? That kind of stuff is just like, oh, well, everybody else on my team's got it. My dad's got pain. It just must be part of the, hey, getting old, right? Like, you hear all these things. So it's not easy, Brian. It's just not easy. It's not easy to take somebody's worldview, smash it, and say, hey, you ready to train now? It's like you kind of got to let them down gently. And is, like you've seen in the cert, going through a storyboard, showing people what Goata is, not starting with, hey, stop doing this, more so, hey, look what this is showing us. Hey, look at how these people move. Doesn't that look good to you? Isn't that aesthetically pleasing? Doesn't that make sense that your foot shouldn't collapse? Yeah. And then once you kind of show them Goata, then it's easier to say, okay, now look at WOTA. And then it pops and it stands out. And it kind of it makes more sense to people. So that's usually the easier flow, to start with the good, explain what Goata is, and then slowly start to show, or let them ask the questions. Well, what do you think about deadlifting? Well, let's look at it. And then we look at it, and then they go, oh, it's hard to ignore. Now, that person probably, or will most likely, have other things in their life that are more influential than me at the time, that are going to pull them or bring them. All their friends are on the same path.
Yeah.
All their coaches, their parents, and there's this one guy they don't really know or trust yet telling them something different. And so it's much harder for that person to say, dude, I'm not doing what you're doing. I'm doing my own thing. The people that do that are, they're the cowboys, they're the renegades, they're the trendsetters, and any new revolutionary idea has those people at the forefront. But eventually, I see the collective subconscious change, more and more people not able or even willing to try to argue inside ankle bone high. And the more that happens, the slow sort of changeover I think you'll see in the population.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's challenging because I've slowly moved away. At first with the Goscu, I was like, well, we shouldn't lift if our bodies are not balanced. And so most people aren't balanced, so we'd have to but they came to a gym to lift weights. So it's like, how do we slowly get other movements in? We've been running a test because I believe that if your body works the way it's supposed to, strength should show up. You'll see that strength naturally there. So over the last week, we put some people's close to max deadlifts on the bar. So don't yell too much. But they have the deadlifts, and they're like, well, when are we going to have heavy lift? And so we would do child rockers, the crawl up and back, did some the bone high walking, and almost everybody was able to hit close to their max. And if it wasn't close to the max, they're like, this is the best this weight ever felt, even though we did
Right.
no lift training. And so what we found is like almost trying to get stronger deadlifting for the people that are what you would guys call WODA is you just feel worse. But doing other correctives to get the body moving the way it's designed, it almost always feels better and stronger. So yeah, we're trying to figure out that and learning from you guys how to shift that lifting mindset. I know you talked about Tom Brady a little bit. You learned from his coach. He's an interesting guy because I believe you guys would say he's a Goata as far as
Yeah, he
movement.
definitely has. Yeah, he has a lot of his Goata still in him.
Yeah, and he doesn't lift much at all in his training programs, if I remember correctly. Is
Yeah,
that
I would say if you were to look at his program, it's more of a movement based. Pliability is kind of the word that they use at TB12, and so you can see the focus shift
yeah,
to more of length and suppleness, and this idea of flowing and movement. The path of least resistance equals the most forced, and so the most efficient version of you is the one that has that's it's a snap, and there's a certain snap that the Gotas have, and it's what allows them to bam, whip that corner in their run, in their cut, in their jump, in their throw, in their swing, and that efficiency ultimately is longevity. If the ankle and the foot are efficiently organized so that force can work through, pressure can work through, well, that's going to be its strongest version. Obviously, if it's not organized and it's deficient and you're not harnessing the power of the Achilles and everything surrounding upstream, well, it logically makes sense that that will be a weaker version of you. And the kind of tricky part with Goa and what we try to frame for people is, for whatever reason, the musculoskeletal system is being treated different than all the other systems are being treated in the human body. And I always use this analogy for people, or this example, with the cardiovascular system, right? If you go to a cardiovascular doctor, you go to get your heart checked, to get your blood work checked, they know there's a certain rhythm, a certain tempo, a certain cadence that is optimal for that system to flow. All
right?
we're doing at Goda is saying there's an optimal cadence, there's an optimal rhythm, tempo to the musculoskeletal system. And most importantly, it's a system, meaning that the foot, the different compartments, if you just look at the compartments of the musculoskeletal system, the foot, shin, thigh, torso, bicep, forearm, hand, and head and neck, those compartments have an integrated sort of operating system, integrated factory sense that we observed when we look at durable humans. Really, when you look at the baby and the indigenous, because they're to me the two most important pieces of that four group, the four tribe sort of study, and because they're the ones that will show you that cadence, when left undisturbed, should just always be there. But now in this modern world, the cadaver science template that we talk about, and it's just to paint the picture for people. We call it cadaver science because what happened was we took isolated muscles and isolated ranges that we made up, and then we said, let's strengthen and let's stretch those isolated muscles and isolated ranges. And it's like the cardiovascular doctor only looking at one little strip of a vessel, and it doesn't make any sense in the big picture of what's going on throughout the system. So trying to get people to work back to system thinking and see integration through the musculoskeletal system is a good red pill to get people to go, oh yeah, that does make sense. Like every other system has this normal flow and it's all integrated. But for whatever reason, when you get to musculoskeletal system, now you have a knee doctor and you have an ankle doctor, a foot doctor, and you have a back doctor, and you got a shoulder guy, and you got like, why did it get broken up? Where did it get broken up? And I think that comes from the question that was posed, or the way that the research was set out. And a lot of it was set out based off of single plane, single range, somebody with a scalpel that was naming muscles. There are no isolated, a muscle isn't real. It's an integrated suit. All those things are integrated into one suit that works. You don't strip the glute off, you don't strip the deltoid off and set it to the side and then Velcro it back on. It's an integrated system that's moving pressure. And that movement of pressure needs to be harmonized. And that movement of pressure is this basic sort of pumping action of the column, if you will, the spring action of the column that's easily observed at the beginning of life, even in the womb. And then when undisturbed in the tribes of the Karubo that are butt naked barefoot, they look just like a baby. You look at a baby standing and trying to move around, and then you watch the Karubo adults, they all move the exact same. So what we're trying to show people is there's a general tempo or cadence to this thing, and it's not to be messed with. And when it's messed with, you start to have disharmony, and that leads to pain and eventual a non-contact or a possible joint replacement, or just problems the rest of your life with how you move and how you feel.
Yeah, I love that connection between like the natural, the Karubo, and the babies, because it's like if that's our ideal, so many people think that like, oh, I'm older, I shouldn't move like a child anymore. Like things change. It's like it's only changed because we've lost that
Mm-hmm.
blueprint. You guys are really tying it back to that. Um,
Yeah, it's all
one of the
tied
things
back to the
because we work with
blueprint for sure.
yeah. So Goata, when we look at it, it shows a lot of athletes. The people we tend to work with, often they chronic pain, knee injuries, they're trying to get through their day. Would you be able to share, I guess, two kind of stories? One is like the athlete where they weren't able to play or like kind of the injuries they were having. And then also one like kind of the best case study, like someone who was in a lot of pain, they're back living their life because we've been taught like, oh, you have knee pain, you don't have cartilage, like you're like, good luck. And we've
Mm-hmm.
seen to get
Mm-hmm.
back. It's like shifting that belief of what's possible. Hearing those stories is always helpful. Like, so like if you could share one like of an athlete and then someone who might be 50, 60, trying to get back, live their life type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the most famous guy you could look at is Go to Joe, and Go to Joe is essentially the first sort of guinea pig of the system, and he's kind of the first guy that Gary and Gilly put through the recode. And Joe was a guy who he had meniscus problems, he had ACL problems, and they were able to just through and the system's evolved since, so it's even cleaner now in its application. But just getting Joe closer to the mat, they saw his numbers go through the roof. So his numbers improved, and then his movement efficiency improved. And little things like, Joe being like, man, after every workout or after every practice, I always had to like ice my knees. There was just this chronic pain at the knee level. And that was really where he suffered the most. And what he noticed was the more and more he did Goata, the less and less maintenance he needed. The more and more he did Goata, the better the numbers got. And he wasn't even necessarily training in a way that was similar to what he had done before as an athlete. It wasn't a heavy back squat. It wasn't heavy deadlift. It wasn't heavy weight. It was more so, hey, I'm going to focus on where I put my foot. I'm going to focus on where my head control is. I'm going to focus on how decompressed. I'm going to really be intentful to my movement. And Go to Joe is that first success story to Goata. And you could even, looking at the elderly population, you can look at Gilly as, Coach Bosch, Jose Bosch, as really the first guy to kind of try it out on himself. And he was someone who had blown out 3 levels of his back in his lumbar region. And just from him changing his feet, getting inside ankle bone high, he was able to, what was supposed to be eventually a cage put into his spine, he was able to go on and golf 5 days a week and work through triathlons and all those different things, to where he got his quality of life back. And that was really what his original search was to get that quality of life. Now, those two stories are kind of very similar to what we see from a lot of our athletes. Another, probably one of the bigger names that's doing really well right now is Kerry Carpenter, and he's working with Jake Naderman down in Florida area, a Goata coach, and Jake's done a tremendous job with Kerry, and Kerry's a similar guy, dealing with some chronic pain, dealing with some soreness, dealing with some inefficiencies in his movement patterns, and now with this sort of new lens on his movement, he's able just to see the training different. He's able to maintenance the body different. He's able to swing the bat, throw the ball different. And you see it in his performance. And he's a guy that, kicking around in the minor leagues, and then boom, he gets his shot at the majors, and he's doing his thing up at the major league level. So, you have stories like Kerry, you have stories like Joe, you have stories like Gilly. We have you know, I can't tell you how many times Gary's on the phone with me telling me, oh, this person came in and they had just, an elderly population, not even necessarily elderly. I kind of put the group, there's like your athletes that are like, they're looking for performance. Like there's like an hour or two a week that these people are underneath the microscope for performance. And it's like, it's their job. And those people, what they need from Goda is more intense than, let's say, like somebody that's just like, hey, I work a 9 to 5. I got a desk job. I got a family. I'm not trying to do the landmine, but I also don't want to be in back pain. Like, what is there for me with this system? And the majority of the system is really built for Gen Pop. I think the athlete gets showcased just because it's sexier and it's Instagram and muscles and high speed, and they've got the accolades. You can give out their 40 number. Timmy down the street that works the 9 to 5, he ain't running the 40, but he does have back pain and he does have knee pain. And I don't care if you work a 9 to 5 or your most strenuous thing in the day is dealing with your kids throughout the house. When you're in pain, your performance will suffer. Whether your performance is behind a desk or your performance is being there for your family or your performance is Monday Night Football. It doesn't matter. It's still performance. It's just obviously the levels are a little bit different. And they're obviously, the stakes are much higher, essentially at that pro level, but the pain is still the same. And everybody's still managing that pain. And so what Goda has done is we've taken that blueprint and we have built out a system that is very similar to how systems are really already set for us in the Western world. You start with an assessment, you move into correctives, prehab, rehab, and then you work your way up into your high intensity training, right? Where you're now, trying to increase strength, you're trying to increase endurance. So whether you find yourself as someone that's like, yeah, I'm a weekend warrior. I want to run. I want to jump. I want to cut. I do these things. I want to golf. I want to throw a baseball. I have all these, goals that I want to do physically. Or you're just the person that's like, dude, I'm lazy. I don't really care about this fitness stuff. I just don't want to be in pain. The system's built for you on either end of that spectrum because the system is you. And that's what we're trying to get across to people is that there are certain non-negotiables when it comes to this thing, right? There's certain things that we're finding out that you can't do with it over time because it will strip away the longevity of it. And so, anybody listening that's in that Gen Pop, go see a Goda because they're not going to necessarily put you through a landmine or a sled push, but there's something there for you on that groundwork. And then that base cornerstone of the groundwork, and like we're going through with you, Ryan, like reorganizing your crawl, reorganizing your Seiza, like those are skills for life. Like when you reorganize those positions and you can get in and out of them throughout your day, I promise you that your quality of life will be very, very different. And then if you choose to ramp things up to the athletic level, you have the ability to do that. So, we're seeing wins on both sides of it. We're seeing a lot of, I think back to some of the minor league players, that we work with, Jacob Robson, Thomas the JC, and some of these guys that they come in with pain, they come in with back problems, hamstring problems, knee problems, and just a new lens on things, even just the assessment, just the awareness of what's wrong and what's right, often is enough to make significant change. And a good example of that is, Gary and Gilly would have these young kids come in they were the reason, they were the client, they were the reason for the assessment. But the parents sitting back there listening to it, and they're like, you can see them. It's always funny. You'll see the parents, like, as we're talking, like, start to fix their feet, start to pull their hips back because they're in pain too. They're just not, they don't care, it's for the kid. But then they start to notice it. And we see that so much. Parents show up with their kids and they're there to protect their children. And then they eventually raise their hand and like, I'm suffering the same problems as well. And then they eventually get assessed. And then those people that aren't trying to increase strength, aren't trying to increase endurance necessarily, just by fixing your walk, your standing, and then changing some of your sitting, that's almost 90% of it. And if you can, get that part fixed, man, it's a much better quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm noticing changes for myself. I still have some sticking points, for sure. It's been a long journey for me. I had someone come in the other day, and she hip borne acetabulum retroversion, where her hip is backwards, basically. She had
Hmm.
a condition where her meniscus and like cartilage tears in the knee joints. She was born with it. She's
Hmm.
had 6 surgeries on her knees. She's like, there's nothing there, and she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't get on on the floor. Like, there's
Right.
no way I'm kneeling. Um, would you feel like some of the Egoscue PRI work could be helpful, or where would you start them if she came in to see you and you're like, she's like, hey, I want to get out of pain. I've been in chronic pain for the last 30 years. She's 39. She's like, just her story is kind of crazy. Like, she was bedridden for 2 years after sitting at a movie because her knee locked up and they couldn't.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy. So I'd be curious, someone like that comes in for Gotas. Do you have a path there? Because I know a lot of the groundwork has been
Hmm.
amazing for people and putting enough pad down, but like I don't even know if she'd feel comfortable even if we put 18 pillows down. Um,
Right. Yeah. No, there's definitely, and that's where Egoscue comes in. And
okay.
like the towers, and some of the straps and some of the like, on your back, just getting your legs up, like almost just trying to hit reset and get some pressure out of the lower back. We have a course on our website called a decompression course. And it's
Mhm.
for that person. Like it's for the person that like, and we were talking about this before when we were on some calls, the milestones. Like, okay, I'm at standing, can I get down to all fours? And so for her, the answer is no. Like she can't hang out in all fours. She can't even do any work on all fours. So we've kind of like almost have to let the system decompress a little bit. And that's where I do think there's tons of value in getting on your back, getting your legs up, just trying to get some space to start to where you feel like you have a little bit of relief. And the whole goal of that though is to get them to all fours.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to use that relief to get a little bit of space, even if it's just in the moment, even if it's just in the times that they come to you for work, starting with the Egoscue Tower or starting with, legs up on an ottoman or something, just to kind of like, hey, you've been vertical with everything jammed into the front chain. Let's try to like just let's start where the baby kind of starts. Essentially, as the baby starts on its back, and that's still like it's not back chain dominance, but the baby's goal is then to roll over to get into its back chain so that it can move forward. So you're kind of using that same process with a person like that. Like, let's lay you on your back. Let's kind of get your legs up. Let's get things to reset. Let's get the pressure out of that hip for a second with just the mindset of if I can get them out of pain and if I can get her to feel good for even 10, 20 minutes, in that I got that 10, 20-minute window to now, okay, let's try all fours right now. Because if we ask her to wake up in the morning, get down to all fours, she's like, there's no way. But if she can come in and maybe with, like Gary's good with Electron Plus, and we have massage therapists that are in the system, and we have McKenzie therapists that are in the systems, and they have their tools and their techniques to kind of almost trick the nervous system to let go of this tension for a second, for a little bit of time, and now you've got a working window. And when you find that working window, then we can start to roll over to, okay, now it's time to go forward. And then it's like we worked with you, like just get to all fours and let's take inventory. And so for her, it'd be a situation of let's do a little decompression just to get some pain out of the system so the nervous system relaxes. Then let's try to get to all fours. And then she probably wouldn't even be in the rocking portion of it yet. She would just be in, do you feel what it's like to be upside down, inside ankle bone high? Can you feel what it's like to reorganize your foot in this position? Because those positions of all fours, Seiza, the resting, they're to me the same thing. Like if you grew up in the Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo era where you'd, blow on the cartridge, hit reset, that's your version of hitting reset in the nervous system. And so we're always trying to work them back to that.
Yeah.
But if they can't get there like cold, we don't want to force it. We don't want to slam the suitcase shut. We don't want to waterboard that person's nervous system because, like we're working with you, and you're like, I got in a hip stretch rocker and like it locked up. It's like, okay, back up. Like that's too much for you right now. It doesn't mean that's a bad movement. It just means where your system is currently. Let's not push it because, as we know, the nervous system will seize up on us and it'll say, not letting you do that. So you have to like really gently bring it back online or bring it back to its factory settings. Now, that lady is never going to be a go to 10. But that's not the point. The point is to get her out of pain and for her to have an actionable plan throughout her day to then, if she finds herself in pain, know what to do to stop the compounding sort of interest that happens on musculoskeletal systems. And that's what's tearing people apart, is that pain sets in. There's really no actionable plan to hit reset, and it compounds, it compounds, it compounds. What will more so happen for someone like that, or for someone that, let's say you find yourself super wrecked, I'm a double knee replacement candidate, or whatever your problem may be, uh, for you, it's going to be this Goata thing will be a maintenance. You will now have a plan. You will be able to brush the teeth when you get plaque on your teeth because you ate some sour punch strip. You will be able to sort of brush the lower back, brush the pelvis, brush the hip, and find yourself in a essentially almost a non-negotiable sitting marathon. We're all going to be in them. We're
Yeah.
all going to find ourselves in a car. We're going to find ourselves in chairs. So we need some sort of rinse of the nervous system. And that little process for her, accompanied with, like we talked about, hey, how are you standing? How are you sitting? Are you finding a way to try to almost reset and decompress the system, even when you do find yourself in a chair? And then what's your walk look like? Can we address the walk a little bit with a walking up and back, a little bit of support? And so if you're attacking it from all those angles, that person can then start to decompress and feel better. But those are the trickiest cases. Those cases are tough and they're not easy. And it takes time and it takes a lot of communication with that person, because we've found that, man, just even one little movement in the wrong direction or too much too soon it can lock up. So you have to be very careful. And we found that, the Gostu towers on your back, then roll over to all fours, reorganize, then push back to Seiza, then move the hands up from Seiza, then get into like side to side rockers and toe tuck, then push back into bolt, then start to stand up, some support, and then eventually working to one pivot point. So while you may not ever have to conquer that whole milestone lineage I just laid out, just starting your journey on that milestone is reps taking you away from breakdown. And that's the goal, is have something that's in place in your day to day to make you comfortable.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, the thoroughness, because I was like looking through. I'm like, okay, how do I apply it to her? I'm like, I'm gonna go with breathing, some static back and stuff like that, because we tried even just standing, and standing locked up her right side.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's just lay down. And so
Right.
just doing that, she's like, oh, I feel
Right. It's like you got to back up.
yeah. And so yeah, that reset of just laying on your back, legs up on an ottoman, tremendously powerful, and people don't realize it. And so yeah, I just thank you
Mm-hmm.
for that, 'cause that open-minded is like, how do we just get relief for people at the end of the day? Like, get them something that they can move forward with. So almost out of time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for myself more than you talked about the legs being springs, like a spring technology in the legs
Mm-hmm.
and a brachiation technology in the arms. And so Goda has a lot of the spring technology stuff. That's kind of the ground up, which makes complete sense. Like, that's the first thing that hits the ground. If somebody wanted to make
Mm-hmm.
a Goda model from brachiation down, do you think that's possible? I know you said for most people their movement patterns aren't good for that, but if somebody wanted, like, hey, here's the
Mm-hmm.
basic hang, to maybe like a small swing, like, do you think that's possible, worth the time? Because I like hanging from monkey bars. It feels great for me. Things decompress.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a very valid question. And my own personal sort of history with it was I did a lot of that hanging, I did a lot of that decompression stuff, and it does feel good because all of us are essentially
Mhm.
99% of the humans that I see are a pre-cornered shoulder. So just getting them here and kind of spreading the collarbones and hanging definitely brings in some release and some relief. The tricky part with it is that we came down from the tree, or however you want to look at it, like wherever your belief is on that thing, whether it's somebody designing it like freaking Prometheus or it's legit evolution, however you want to look at it. When you observe humans in their natural element, they're not necessarily swinging from the tree, but the way that they are using the arm engine is they're using it to throw the spear. So the overhand swing of the arm, the underhand swing of the arm is what kills the meal. That's how you eat, right? So that's how we're actually going to kill something. There are tribes that they'll shoot monkeys out of the trees with poisonous darts. There is that process as well. But even those cultures generally have a machete at the hip, and they're just kind of like picture tennis, just forehands and backhands all day long. And what you want to learn is you want to learn how to use the arms in a Goata mainframe, meaning you want to organize the feet, you want to organize the trunk, you want to organize everything to be back chain dominant so that this upper half can swing. And so any great swing artist or anybody that's been sort of proficient at throwing or swinging something, they will tell you that, man, when I got it going, my arms feel loose. And that's because they're kind of, that brachiation is almost like a yoke. It's sitting on top of the torso, which is sitting on top of the pelvis, which is sitting on top of this really strong, robust spring system below. And that was kind of one of Grakovetsky's things was the spine had to sort of outsource the power to the limbs. And so it kept that same wiggle, but then these limbs came out and they became the drivers. And then eventually we have this ability to kind of get up onto that bipedal position. And now we can swing the arm in harmony with the snap of the hip below and release that power. So swinging from a tree is not going to teach you how to underhand and overhand swing like a Goata. So you could do all the monkey bars in the world and it won't give you the moment of 2 feet in the ground, heels up, tail is back, crown is forward, and now I got to hold inner ankle bone high. So I always tell my throw athletes there's 3 things that I want you to focus on. And we can really take this to even our Goata exercises as a whole. But for my swing athletes, because it's a dynamic movement, because it's fast, it's harder to control the spiral. And so I don't even put their minds there. Instead, we put their minds on 3 things. I need foot control, number 1, meaning get to the ball of your foot, make sure the big toe knuckle is down as the inner ankle bone is high. That's getting the heel up, just like the kickstand on the bike. When it's time to go, the kickstand goes up. So the heel is up. The next thing you need is compression control. Compression control is talking to the overall decompression in the system. And we like to control it with the tail to crown relationship. So your great throw swing artist, here's my tail, here's my crown. The tail will move back, the crown will move forward. And they will hold that relationship as they turn the system. And then the third piece, which is even probably more important to the throw and swing artist, is the tracking system, is head control. Because now I'm actually locking my eyes on a target as I go to underhand swing or overhand swing. And so what we see from the greats that are durable and that have that high accuracy and power, that high octane, the tracking system is going to be just like the run and the walk. It's going to stay steady over if you're right-hander, it's going to be over your right column. Your tail's going to be back, your crown's going to be forward, and you're going to be on the balls of your feet, and you're going to take all that pressure from your right side, and you're going to snap it. And at some point in that halfway mark of the 45-degree release, you're just going to let something go, right? You're going to let a ball go, you're going to let a spear go, or you're going to hold on to it, and you're going to actually release through and hit something, right? You're trying to move something out forward. Like picture a baseball diamond. It's literally a 45-degree pressure wave, and you're trying to win the forward battle. You're trying to send the ball in that direction, just like the pitcher's trying to send it forward. So it's a battle of forward gear going on with an overhand swing and an underhand swing, trying to win that sort of battle. So when it comes to the throw and when it comes to the swing, all that stuff is valid. It's just that it takes place on a hierarchy where it's so dynamic and so fast when you go to throw and swing that it's not where you want to rush people towards. That's why, like, we have a shoulder series, which is going to mainly get your feet organized, get all those things we talked about organized, and then start to use your shoulder. And so what we find with people is that when we organize their feet, we say this to our baseball players and our football players all the time, arm care without foot care is no arm care at all. And so you'll see a lot of people doing arm care, and they're literally just doing arm care. They're just moving their arms. They're not integrating the system. Whereas when you watch Goatas throw and swing, it's a fully integrated system from head to toe to fingertips. And so we first try to reorganize the system into how it just naturally presents. Because if you take a step back and look at all throws, all swings, we're all doing the same thing. I turn one way and I turn back the other. All we're saying is that how you turn is going to make the difference in the longevity of that pattern. And the longevity of that pattern will be your availability to that sport. Your availability to that sport then allows you to up level. So if you find yourself with deficiencies in your throw and your swing, you will find and may find early success, but you will definitely have a back end breakdown that will be a constant maintenance, and you'll start to see a residual sort of going the opposite direction with your speed and with your efficiency and with your sort of target placement. So the throw and the swing are important, and they are pieces. We have a full throw and swing assessment. It's that it's so far along in that model. Like if that model I just brought before, the milestones, I'm standing, I get down to all fours, Seiza, or all fours, rockers, Seiza, bolt, standing up, 2 feet, no support, 1 foot, no support. Now you could actually bring an object in and say, can I swing this machete? Can I throw this spear? Can I throw this baseball without having to break down the efficiency model, right? And that's where your shoulder will be its healthiest. And so it's important to decompress the shoulder. We've just found that in order to really truly decompress it, we've got to have those feet planted. And that's where we kind of disconnect from the hanging, because the hanging is the feet in the air in the open chain. And I think that there's some value for people to, like, look, I used to hang on the bars all the time and it brought me temporary relief and it felt good. But once I learned how to do the shoulder series and I learned how to organize my feet, I don't need to hang to find shoulder relief. I don't need to hang to get the pain out of my elbow. And I coach football, so I'm throwing the ball all day long. And I used to have serious elbow pain, and I would do all the famous exercises and different things, and it did nothing to fix it. And now, just by organizing my feet and everything else, the arm is going to be in a much more advantageous position to have longevity.
Yeah, makes sense. And so it seemed like for the upper body first, like you tell them the ankle bone high, the foot control, decompression, and then head control. And then you guys have more work later. I'd be curious, just running out of time, but are you familiar with some of the rope flow stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what made me think of it is that upper and that cross, that transition. And so like training that, I was playing around with it in ankle bone high, lifting the heels, it's kind of turning into one side. And so that makes sense for the arm. It's like that pattern. I appreciate that explanation, and like still working ground up so the shoulders can decompress. I guess for you, anything that is left that you'd like to share that we didn't cover, you wish you would have got to say?
No, I mean, I think that pretty much touches on most of it. I would say at the end there for the rope flow, the one thing that the rope flow is missing is a target. And that's the underlying point of the throw and the swing. The underlying point of the throw and the swing is hitting a target, like literally hitting something, actually having accuracy in your skill set. Whereas what I see with the rope flow is just a bunch of just arms flailing around. And if I gave that person a football and asked them to throw it, they look like Uncle Rico. They can't actually throw. They can't actually swing something. Like that's where I'm trying to get people to. And what I would say is like, dude, go play pickleball. Like go play, tennis. Go play racquetball. Go play badminton. Go to a baseball diamond. Go to a cage and see if you can hit a ball. Go throw a football at something. Like if you're gonna throw and swing and you want to get into that, then go throw and swing. And that's where I would push people, because I see a lot of people. I understand the concept of the rope flow, but like the whole point of Goata was that once you get to the dynamic setting, now it's time to jog, it's time to run, it's time to enter the competitive arena of the hunt. It's time to fight. It's time to flight. You're in that world now. So everything leading up to that is just to get it organized so that when you do turn up the dial and you go to release the full 22.5 to the 45, it's in an arena that would have been the arena that you were going to succeed in the arena that allowed us to sit here on these phones and talk. And so my whole thing is, and this is just me, as an athlete, I only got so many hours in my day. Don't waste my time. Like, I come from like a very regimented, like, we have a to the minute outline, coach is blowing the whistle, you better be running to the next drill. There's no wasted reps. So when people ask me that, I try to bring that discipline and that intent into their own practice, meaning don't waste your own time. Now, if you love rope flow, you like putting your headset on, and that's the thing for you, that's great. But don't mistake rope flow for your ability to throw a 20-yard out, or your ability to now hit jumpers in the gym, or your ability to swing the bat better. Like, you're going to need to do those things, and do those things often, to be very good at them. So it just becomes a question of what's your goal. If your goal is to get into the workout like a rope flow because it lets you escape from the reality of your day to day, or get away from something and you can kind of get lost in it, by all means, do your thing. It doesn't matter to me. But I'm not going to take a baseball player or an athlete or a quarterback. I will never waste their time with it. Not a chance.
Yeah, for us, it's like a lot of our clients are everyday people who just want to move, burn calories, and also be pain free. So it's like,
Yeah,
what are the things
for sure.
that you can get into? But yeah, it makes sense with the efficiency and time. It seems like a lot of it is do the work to be so that when you need to move, it's efficient, natural, almost effortless. Like the body just responds. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I know, like, for me as a quarterback going through it, I would never, like, I would be pissed if somebody made me do ropes, because I
yeah,
know what it takes to throw a football better now. And you got
right.
to throw the football. You got to throw the football with, hey, balls of feet, tail back, balls of feet, tail back, and you got to learn how to keep level shoulders. That's where I need to spend time with my quarterbacks. So I don't waste my time. I don't waste their time.
Yeah.
Essentially, they only got so many reps to give me in that day. So when you get to the athlete, it's gotta be specific.
So it's train Goda and then pick whatever you want to do with your life, movement wise, and then practice that to get good at it. Yeah. Well,
Here's a red pill. That's exactly it. Here's a red pill I always give to everybody. Like, I'll get the question of, like, powerlifters or jujitsu people or high jumpers or let's look at rock climbers, and they'll always be like, well, like, my sport seems to have some of this WODA in it. And so I go to them like, okay, here's my question for you. Would you rather be a GOATA rock climber or a WODA rock climber? And every time, like, a GOATA rock climber for sure. I'm like, then do GOATA and rock climb. Okay, you want to be a GOATA power lifter or a WODA power lifter? What would you rather what would you rather be closer to? I'd rather be a GOATA version of the power lift. Well, then do GOATA and then do your power lift, right? So you want to be a GOATA quarterback or a WODA quarterback. All right, do GOATA and then do quarterback. And so that cleans it up for people. That lets them sort of figure out what time they're going to allot to what. And there's no in between there where it's, yeah, well, I'm going to do the GOATA and then I'm going to sprinkle in this WODA before I don't even waste your time. Like, just be the GOATA version of whatever it is you love. Whatever it is you love, go keep doing it. Do your thing. Do it all day if you love it. But you want to be a GOATA version of that, because the GOATA version of that rock climber, of that power lifter, of that jiu-jitsu artist, they're the ones that are going to get to enjoy that sport the longest anyways. So you
yeah.
might as well get into your security model. If you truly love this thing, then you will make that sacrifice so that you can do that thing for a lifetime.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's like that regular maintenance. So for if people were to find you, where would you like to send them? Whether it's, I know you mentioned in another podcast, Instagram, but what's the best way to reach you guys and learn more about GOATA and the system?
I would start with goatamovement.com. So let's say you're a coach, or I would say if anybody's interested, we have a sort of like fill out, a little, fill out your name and what you're interested in. If you punch that into, the Goata Movement website, it's there for our coaching cert. But we have people that punch that in like, hey, I'm looking for so and so, I'm looking for this. We're going to answer you. It's going to come to me and Gary. So that's probably your easiest way, outside of just DM us on Instagram. And my handle is at redpill underscore, or at red_pill.rick. You can just type in Ricki Stanzi. Gary's is at GLS_training. So those two spots would be the ones to DM if you're comfortable with that. My email is ricki.stanzi@gmail. So if you want to email me, that's easiest, and we can get back to you. But going to gotamovement.com would be that starting point for most people, and I think they would be able to initiate a call, initiate some sort of discourse back and forth about what's concerning you with Goata, what questions you have. I'm always open to sit and talk, as you all know now, because I will just rant, and you'll probably be kicking me off the phone. But we want to have those healthy discussions because that's the only way that people are going to empty the cup. It's the only way that people are going to get their answers. You won't get your answers through Instagram, but you'll start to see what could potentially be a new lens that you could then learn. And how that lens gets developed, or how clean that lens gets developed for someone like yourself, you're going through the search. So you're going to get to the top, the top level of understanding it. Somebody that's just trying to get on back pain, they may just need a smaller understanding of that. But the same idea takes place. We need a little bit of awareness. So a healthy discussion is always good. So, anybody that's interested, reach out to us on gotamovement.com or Instagram.
Perfect. And yeah, and I really appreciate your guys' responsiveness, like on either email or on the website. You guys very quick to answer and also very thorough and like just being willing to answer questions. So greatly appreciated. Thank you for being on the show. I'd love in some time in the future to have you on again. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. This was great. I'd love to jump back on with you anytime.